picture you're watching now is coming to you out of thin air. You can't see the signals that transmit television, but you can tune into them. A century ago, the whole idea would have been extremely far-fetched. But if we can accept the idea now, should we laugh when some people say their brains can tune into other wavelengths which are invisible, but all around us? Tonight, two stories in which people set out to follow up psychic signals, told through interview and drama reconstruction. We'll follow a group of Americans as they visit the town where they say they lived in former lives. But first, a woman of our times whose success rate rivals the professional crime busters. Her clues come only from psychic communications, but sometimes, she says, she's contacted the police before even they know about a crime. Nella Jones is a psychic detective. She says she can see crimes. She's helped to solve dozens of frauds, kidnappings, and even murders. Nella has worked mainly with the country's biggest police force, the Metropolitan Police in London. They refuse to talk openly about their use of psychic detectives, but Nella has a secret letter of commendation from a senior officer.
How I do it is very difficult to explain. It's just, if you have an itchy ear, you'll scratch it. If I'm involved with a crime, I look at it and I solve it. That's the best way I can describe it.
Now, detectives who've left the police have blown the whistle on Nella's links with them.
I don't know how Nella does it. She helps police an awful lot. She tells police things that possibly they wouldn't know through their normal inquiries. All I know is she helps us.
There's no doubt whatsoever that Nella found clues that we couldn't find. I don't know how she did it, but she did.
Detective Inspector Jim Bays was at the centre of what is undoubtedly Nella's greatest case to date. A £2 million painting, The Guitar Player by Vermeer, had been stolen from Kenwood House, an art gallery on London's Hampstead Heath. Nobody had a clue who'd taken it, neither the police nor the painting's owners, the old Greater London Council.
Was it amateurs, a group of drunks who got in there? Somebody had stolen it, they might not know what to do with it. If they tried to sell it, they might destroy it.
I was doing the ironing on this Sunday evening and only half listening to the television. I was trying to rush with the ironing, not really watching it, was stolen when thieves broke into suddenly this sort of chattering about this very valuable painting that had gone missing from this special
Police have
house.
launched a full-scale hunt across the 800 acres of heathland. Art experts are anxious for the safety of the picture, which is valued at around £2 million. As yet, there's little clue of who might have taken it or why.
I put the iron down.
Kenwood's owners, the Greater London Council, say they are stunned by the theft of such a well-known painting, and they're working with the police for its safe recovery.
A drawing of the
They've appealed for anyone with information on the theft to come forward.
I hadn't got a clue what it meant at the time. I thought, what should I do with it? I didn't feel big-headed or anything like that, but I just knew. So I thought, I've got to do something. So I rang Scotland Yard at first.
I took the first call from Nella, and it's the first call I've ever had from a psychic on any case.
I've got some information on the Kenwood house robbery.
Who are you, madam?
Well, I'm a psychic, actually. My name's Nella Jones.
I see. And what is it you want to tell us exactly?
Well, I've had this vision in my head, and I'm drawn a map where you'll find some clues as to the whereabouts of the picture.
My first reaction was scepticism, and I thought, I hope she's not a crank.
Look directly in front. Down the hill, there's a pond.
She was insistent that she must come and help us to find this painting.
Can we take your number and we'll get back to you?
I thought that they thought I was a nutcase, and I was waiting for the little van to come and take me away.
Jim Bay spoke to a fellow detective.
And she says she's never been...
Well, we had a discussion. We decided that, as we had nothing else to go on, we'd give it a try.
But, I mean, you should have heard her. She was really insistent. I reckon we should get her in.
Yeah.
The two detectives took Nella to the scene of the crime, Kenwood House. Now they discover whether she really could find anything.
I'd never been there before in my life. I'd never heard of the painting or the artist or anything. When I was there, I knew exactly where I had to go.
Something to do with the painting is in there.
OK, Nella, you lead and we'll follow.
She didn't deviate. She went straight to the pond. It's as if she was drawn there.
Getting closer and closer, I had this fantastic sensation. And down by this smelly pond,
hang on,
stopped dead.
I'm going in.
Nella took off her shoes, and I remember she hitched up her skirt, and she walked into the pond.
The detectives watched incredulously.
And bent down and came up with something that was under a couple of feet of water, and she held it up.
Got it!
It was part of an alarm system attached to the back of the painting. The police were stunned. Despite all their searching, this was the closest they'd come to the picture, and it had taken a psychic to find it.
We were absolutely astonished. There could only be two answers. She was either involved in the theft, or she was indeed psychic.
But Nella hadn't finished yet. She led the officers on the route that she claimed the actual thieves had taken when running away from the art gallery.
They ran through here, took a wrong turn and panicked because you lot were here.
I feel either pain, fear, elation, whatever the victim or the villains have felt, I feel it. I felt the panic. I felt as if I were running, I was being chased, and I had to get away. That's what I felt, so I knew exactly where they'd gone.
Where Nella said the thieves had run into the undergrowth, the detectives found bushes wrecked. She was hot on the trail.
My second cross is to do with the frame.
I then told them about the second cross. It was down a windy lane. There were some railings round some trees. And over there, I knew the frame was.
She says it's in the long grass.
We're on our way.
In the space of a morning, Nella had found part of the alarm system, the thieves' escape route, and now the frame which had held the painting. She was fast becoming a prime suspect herself.
The officer in charge of the case wanted Nella arrested. He was convinced that as a result of all she appeared to know, she must be involved in the theft.
Well done, Nell. When did you put it there?
What? The frame?
Mm-hmm.
I thought,
Typical
crikey,
policeman.
I think I've done it,
I tell you.
you know? So it was a bit scary.
It's all in my head.
Her background and her alibis and everything were checked very, very thoroughly, and it became obvious that she wasn't involved in the theft in any way whatsoever. I think I'd known this all the time in my heart, but my head said, you must investigate her.
So if Nella doesn't have inside information, how does she know so much? Could it be a psychic version of methods developed by forensic scientists like Mike Berry? He studies crimes to work out typical patterns of criminal behavior.
I think what's happened with the psychic detectives, they're doing the same. They're saying here is behaviour that isn't as random as it looks. You can predict that if somebody breaks into a house and they're trying to dispose of evidence, they're going to throw it somewhere where they can hide it. A lake is a very sensible place to hide incriminating material.
But does that explain what Nella came up with next? She says that she saw where the painting was hidden, and it wasn't where anyone would have suspected.
Nella Jones. Look, love, I've had another vision. I know where the picture is. It's in somewhere quiet, a graveyard.
The detectives decided Nella was describing Highgate Cemetery, the one nearest Kenwood House. So they took her there.
We searched Highgate Cemetery on several occasions with Nella, but we never found anything.
It looked as if Nella had finally run out of useful psychic clues. But then the burglary took a sinister twist. It emerged this was not the work of ordinary thieves. The IRA had stolen the painting, and as ransom notes began to arrive, the hunt became a race against time.
We were concerned when we found out that the IRA had stolen the painting. Suddenly it became very stark and very realistic that something very nasty could happen.
I predicted, after that, every letter they would receive, one in particular with a piece of canvas in it, which they did receive. There was threats the painting would be burned on St. Patrick's night, and I said, no, it won't. It'll be perfectly safe, and you'll find it in a cemetery, as I have said all the way along.
An anonymous tip-off led detectives not to Highgate, but another cemetery a few miles away, where, lying under some leaves, was what looked like a rolled-up newspaper. Inside was the missing masterpiece, Vermeer's Guitar Player. Nella's role in its recovery was never officially recognized, but the officers involved will never forget what she did.
I've known of many occasions where psychics have been used. It hasn't been publicized. It never will be publicized, but they have been used.
But Nella Jones was, of course, sent a letter by the Metropolitan Police, and this is it. To quote, "It is a mark of your abilities that the police turn to you for help time and time again." Ever been somewhere for the first time and felt sure you'd been there before? Met someone and thought you'd met them before? Had a dream of living another life in another time? Your imagination running wild, or could it really have happened? Reincarnation is probably mankind's oldest belief. About half the world's population, including Hindus, Buddhists and Sikhs, accept reincarnation as a fact, and it was only abandoned by the Christian religion in the 6th century. People who remember past lives almost always tell of violent or untimely deaths, and recent research has shown that the wounds they describe often match birthmarks. A group of people in America are convinced that they are reincarnations of the inhabitants of a small town on the other side of the continent. Their story dates back to the American Civil War, to old lives that have gone with the wind.
They were my memories of her death. I think this just can't be Maureen, this is not occurring, Maureen. And who's Becky? What is this? What's going on? And I was leaving the hypnotherapist and I stopped my car dead in the road.
Maureen Williamson couldn't forget or understand the images in her mind.
I cried, I shook. Here I am. I'm a down-to-earth mother. I'm a newspaper reporter. And all of a sudden I'm referring to a life that happened over 135 years ago.
She was so worried that she consulted psychiatrists, but it was only under hypnosis that she found answers, like the name that wouldn't go away.
Who is John Daniel Ashford?
He's my husband.
What year is it?
1861.
What's going on?
There's a war.
So then I ascertained from more questioning that we were in this little town in Virginia, Millboro, and that the era was that of the American Civil War.
Maureen had made what was to be the first of many links between past and present. She described her life as Becky, wife of John Daniel Ashford, who she said was a wartime spy.
For the majority of the marriage, it was a very happy one. But the war had taken a terrible, terrible toll on the country. Becky's sympathies lay very firmly with the South. But Becky was aware that her husband did have sympathies for the North.
Several lifetimes on and 1,800 miles away in Lake Elsinore, California, Maureen's visions then began to involve other local people.
She came out of the trance and she announced casually, "I saw Joe back there." I said, "Well, who's Joe?" "Well, Joe Nazarowski. He has a security office down on Main Street."
Joe had no idea that any of this was going on.
Maureen made up an excuse to persuade Joe, an ex-police chief, to see the hypnotherapist.
Before Joe came in to see me, he had no knowledge of what was going on, of what his role was in it. He was very surprised when he found out and very skeptical.
But Maureen hadn't picked out the reincarnation of her husband. Under hypnosis, Joe Nazarowski became Charlie Morgan, like her husband a spy, but for the other side. And there was a bigger shock to come.
Becky and I are lovers. She comes to visit me in the boarding house where I live.
When I found out that Maureen had related pretty much the same story that I related, I was amazed that was that close.
The story was getting like some sort of novel. And as Dr. Marge Reeder began gathering groups together, she found over 50 people who claimed to have lived together in former lives in Millboro during the American Civil War. Their separate accounts all seemed to tie in. But the key to the story, Becky's husband, John Daniel Ashford, remained missing. Until one night, Marge was out with a friend.
My God, it's John.
What?
It looks exactly like him.
I had this overpowering sensation of recognition. I got kind of a bolt of electricity through my body.
Building worker Pat Green thought the claims were ridiculous. He refused to get involved.
When I was told that I was this John Daniel Ashford, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want any part of it. Wasn't going to let them hypnotize me. It took about 3 years for them to finally persuade me.
He's a very difficult subject. He fights it.
But however reluctantly, Pat Green did feel something, and to his amazement, his story fitted the others.
I came up with something that really made me feel that there's more to this than I thought. Marge showed me an old photograph of Millborough, and I picked out this particular house. My feelings are there is a hidden room underneath it, and in a smaller house on the same property, there's a trap door that leads to a tunnel.
It was information which would change Pat's mind. But was he too falling victim to a grand fantasy?
And it's got a big barn next to it, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. This is a kind of cooperative play that is being enacted. I think hypnosis is very unreliable. There is no accurate record in the memory. It's the hypnotist who believes in this that implants suggestions in the subject.
Or are the memories real?
I would not allow Marge to prompt me at any time or give me any suggestions. If it doesn't come out of my head, I don't want to say it.
Under hypnosis, Diana Lovegren became Becky's 6-year-old daughter, Elizabeth.
When she asked me who my mother was, that's when I saw it in an instant, and I was just freaked out. The whole thing was flashing before my eyes. Horrible, horrible.
Finally, all the stories Dr. Marge Reeder heard were adding up. She worked out that John Daniel Ashford knew Charlie Morgan was working for the other side in the Civil War. His fears were then raised when he found out that Charlie was seeing a local woman.
He felt that the information might be going the other way, so he ordered her killed, not knowing that that particular lady was his wife.
Morning, Mrs. Ashford.
And now Maureen Williamson
Nice day.
knew what her nightmares meant.
My feeling during the regression was, no, I don't want to go.
Nice day for a walk. You'll be coming with me.
And then the next thing I remember is that I was in the barn. And in the barn is where I saw the struggle.
No, stop! No!
I watched them, and they fought, and somehow he hit her, and she went down. And then he just got up and ran off. But I stayed where I was. I knew she wasn't going to get up. I knew it.
Diana says she was still there when her father came in and discovered her mother's body.
Becky!
So, have the people of Millborough really been reincarnated together? Or is there another reason for it all?
Cryptomnesia is an explanation. This is past memory. In other words, you read novels, you see films, and then under a relaxed situation with a hypnotist, you come forth with the story.
Whatever the theories, the only way to prove the story was for Dr. Marge Reeder to take the main characters to the half-abandoned town of Millborough for the first time, in this life at least. Would it be as they described? And would they be able to prove the detailed knowledge they come up with under hypnosis?
Nearest thing to a ghost town that you can possibly find.
Marge took this videotape as Maureen and Joe revisited the haunts of Becky and Charlie.
Every time we turned a corner, we found something that they had talked about in hypnosis.
This is the main street through Millborough. There used to be a saloon, a tavern, boarding houses upstairs.
Joe had described the red boarding house as white, so were his memories false?
You can see now that it's red, but you could see the underpaint was white.
Then Marge tried an experiment. First, she took Joe to find the room where he'd stayed in his previous life.
Where was your room, Joe?
Next, she took Maureen. Would she choose the same room?
I want to show you where my room's at.
I know where your room's at. Joe, let's see it. Let her lead us to your room. That's it. That's the one he said. His room. He said this room was his.
That's right. These seemed like minor details to the majority of the population, but to us, they were just terrific.
Maureen began digging where she says Becky's house was. She found what appeared to be a fence post.
That was a thrill to see that, to know that I was accurate.
But all this isn't enough to convince Rick Armstrong, author of 6 books on Millborough's history.
The buildings in Millborough are quite old, but it's hard to date them, and so it's uncertain if they were there during the Civil War period. As far as John Daniel Ashford and Becky Ashford, the constable was not named Ashford at that time, and as her murder was a sensational thing. However, it does not appear in any newspapers or any court records.
But one piece of evidence was unearthed to make historians think again when a fire destroyed the house where Pat Green supposedly remembered an underground room.
The owner dug out and found an actual room that was underneath where the house had been, and also found the door in the floor and the tunnel that led to this room. This whole area with the tracks, in my mind, I had pictured something just like this. This house, or a house like this, that bridge, and it's here. How do you explain that? This is weird. It gives me the creeps.
I have faced the fears that I've had. I wasn't looking so much for the truth to the story. What I was looking for was my soul.
Maureen Williamson's present life has mirrored her past memories. She's now married to one of the Millborough characters, and this time she's hoping for a happy ending. And those are our stories. Whatever you feel about people who claim psychic powers, let me show you this. It was made in Victorian times, and it maps out different areas of the brain: power of will, agreeableness, and knowing faculties. These days, we know much more. Scans can clearly show which areas of the brain are active when, for example, we work out a sum or when we sing. But still, nobody knows how the brain works or what, ultimately, it might be capable of. Good night.